Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our regional long-range transportation plan update meeting being provided to the city of Pittsburgh. Thank you all for being here and for participating. My name is Dominic DeAndrea, and I am SBC's Transportation Planning Director. I'd like to acknowledge the city of Pittsburgh's representation on SPC board. That would be Mayor Gainey, Reverend Burgess, Scott Bricker, Aurora Sherrard, and Mavis Rainey, along with the City of Pittsburgh DOMI staff, and thank them for their continuing support in the development of the long-range plan and the transportation improvement plan. We are recording the meeting solely for the purposes of making sure that we capture any and all comments. I'd ask that you hold your questions until the end of the presentation. We have about 28 or 29 slides here, I think. We're here today to talk about future investments in our region, and specifically City of Pittsburgh, and present you with the region's draft long-range transportation plan. The long-range transportation plan is the most important effort led by SPC. We started this effort last year, and it included many meetings with your county and city planners, PennDOT folks, Pittsburgh Regional Transit, and others. The draft long-range plan invests about $2.9 billion into specific highway and multimodal projects in Allegheny County. In addition, there is another $1.7 billion that we have reserved in line items that can be used for projects in Allegheny, including City of Pittsburgh, Beaver, and Lawrence counties. These are three counties within PennDOT District 11. We will talk about some of the specific City of Pittsburgh projects later in this presentation. Next slide, please. All right. The presentation will cover many of the key aspects of the long-range plan development, such as schedule, public involvement, the review of the plan's policies and strategies. Then we will cover the transportation planning and long-range plan project list development, including a look at current TIP funding and projects advancing from the long-range plan to the TIP, and some of the listed current long-range plan projects. Then we'll shift gears a little to discuss activities and progress relative to economic development and community initiatives portions of our plan. Next slide, please. So we started this effort last summer. We had a number, our policies, our vision, goals, and strategies were reviewed by our policy committee and our commissioners. We've had work group meetings. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We had our initial public participation, public meetings. That was last fall. We had meetings with our transit operators. We went to our committees, our Transportation Technical Committee and Transit Operator Committee committees to approve our draft project lists. And afterwards, once we got those project lists blessed, we conducted the environmental justice analysis, the federally required environmental justice analysis, and federally required air quality conformity. We assembled a draft document, and that's where we're at today. We're in a 30-day public comment period, and we're here in our second round of public meetings, all in the hopes of having our long-range plan adopted at our June commission meeting. Next slide, please. So this long-range plan update utilizes the efforts of the previous 2019 plan as a basis. The 2019 plan used an extensive process that included expert resource panels, public surveys, and public outreach to develop the region's vision, goals, and strategies. Most of what was developed in terms of vision, goals, and strategies is still relevant for this plan. Our policy committee, commissioners, and county planners reviewed the previous vision, goals, and strategies, and we have updated them based on their feedback. More feedback was also received from the first set of public meetings for this plan back in November and December of last year. Two major events have happened since the last time we did this in 2019. We are emerging from COVID-19 and dealing with its impacts on transportation and specifically transit and the economy. And we have the new transportation bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Job Act, that has provided us additional funding in the short term. Next slide, please. The revised vision statement is a world-class, safe, well-maintained, and connected multimodal transportation system that provides mobility for all, empowers resilient and sustainable communities, and supports a globally competitive economy. A mouthful. The regional vision means taking advantage of our considerable existing assets and developing, supporting, and implementing projects and programs that advance our progress. Transportation is about creating and connecting people to opportunity and life's activities, including jobs and opportunity. The opportunity can be physical, tangible connections like improved regional transit or enhanced broadband connectivity, as we found out during COVID. The opportunity can create connections to training for the jobs of the future that allow the region's workforce to have family-sustaining job opportunities in new and emerging industries. It is about connecting with opportunities to invest in and take stewardship of our older communities, as well as investing in strategies that protect our environment and address climate change and resiliency. Next slide, please. So this slide shows examples of how projects contained in the plan advance the vision and strategies. Of course, again, the guiding principles developed from work done through our expert panels previously and our recent commissioner feedback, and input gathered from the public and stakeholder involvement. On the transit side, it means equitable, seamless linkages between the region's public transit service, including first and last mile connections. That could be expansion of rapid and frequent transit service into and out of downtown Pittsburgh from the east, west, north, and south. For active transportation, it means completion of the regional trail network and connecting the regional trail network to communities and local active transportation networks to support healthful living and individual mobility. For roadways, it means a network of safe, well-maintained, and modern highways and bridges. And implementation of resilient and adaptable context-based street design. Next slide, please. The transportation planning process goes through various steps in the cycle to produce the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, and the Long Range Plan. The Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, is a 4-year plan of projects that are active or about to be active that has a major update every 2 years. The Long Range Transportation Plan is a 25-year plan that requires an update every 4 years. So we have this draft Long Range Transportation Planning document completed after many months of effort. So in the next 30 days, we want your feedback on the draft plan. Later on, we will let you know how you can do that. Next slide, please. This diagram depicts the general process that was followed during development of the Long Range Plan project list development. Public involvement begins and ends the process of updating the Long Range Plan. We're here today near the end of the process to provide a summary of the draft plan. We worked through our 3 Long Range Plan development work groups. For the city area, this includes SPC staff, PennDOT District 11 staff, city staff, PRT staff, and Allegheny County staff. We utilize this work group to review current conditions and status of performance measures and to develop long-range needs and candidate projects. SPC conducted screening and consistency criteria analysis to review the candidate projects and provide input to the work groups. A conservative identification of the future transportation revenues was done, leading to the creation of an investment plan in collaboration with members of the work groups. The group updated the cost estimate and timing for projects already on the long-range plan and integrated new projects as needs and funding allowed. There was a total of 9 work group meetings to come to a consensus on the region's long-range plan draft project list. Environmental justice analysis and air quality conformity analysis were also conducted in the late winter and early spring. Next slide, please. Here were the focus areas for investment in the fiscally constrained draft plan. Asset management and safety continue to be key focus areas for the region. With additional federal funds for bridges under the IIJ transportation legislation, we have a significant number of new bridge projects listed in the long-range plan. We've made significant progress in the last 10 years on the decreasing the amount of poorly rated bridges. In the last 10 years, we've cut that in half, but we still have some work to do. In terms of state-owned bridges, we still have 9.5% of those bridges in poor condition. And in terms of local bridges, about 25% of our local bridges are in poor condition. Local bridges, including many city bridges, were important areas to invest in this draft plan. The other focus, as always, transit operations and facilities were another key area for investment. The other focus areas are listed here, including multimodal ped bike programs. The long-range plan work groups reviewed all candidate projects with these focus areas in mind. Then working versions of the long-range plan fiscally constrained project list are developed and discussed. The process was collaborative and consensus-driven in order to come to the version of the draft project list. Next slide, please. The long-range plan is a long-term view of the transportation investments in SPC region out to 2050, year 2050. Within this time frame, a conservative estimate of the revenue that is reasonably expected to be available was developed. Projects put on the plan cannot exceed this amount in what's referred to as fiscal constraint. The time frame is broken down into 3 stages, and funds are assigned to each stage. Stage 1 is the current TIP, and the current TIP years are 2023 to 2026. In this time frame, we have a very detailed program of all the projects and list projects by phase, year, fund type, and amount. Stage 2 is the next 8 years after the end of the current TIP. In this stage, we include the total remaining on a project beyond the TIP years and total cost of projects set to start in this stage 2. This stage does not include minor projects, and it does include investment category line items. In the third stage, only large investment projects are identified and large amounts of funding are shown residing in investment line items. The project scopes and cost estimates are more conceptual in this latter third stage. Keep in mind that this time frame represents numerous TIP updates, as I said before, every 2 years, and extends all the way out to 2050. Next slide, please. First up are the highway and bridge investments, then I'll touch on the transit investments. This graph shows the investment breakdown by investment category. Bridges, as I mentioned, continue to receive the highest percentage of the investment at 44%, followed by roadways at 32%. You can see that safety, efficiency, and operations and SPC competitive programs also receive a significant slice of the investment. SPC competitive programs, which are Transportation Alternatives Program, CMAQ program, which is Congestion Mitigation Air Quality, Carbon Reduction Program, which is new, a new program out of IIJA, and Smart Transportation account for approximately 9% of the investment. Individual projects are evaluated and selected on a 2-year cycle consistent with our TIP development process. Next slide, please. One of the other key characteristics of the long-range plan highway bridge investment is its focus on major corridors. These are all routes on the national highway system that performance condition is monitored and reported to our federal highway funders. You can see on the map the major corridors in our counties receiving investment in this plan. in and around the city of Pittsburgh, it includes Route 8, Route 19, Route 28, Route 51, and State Route 65. Next slide, please. Next, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here to the city level and provide some project highlights. I've noted here a few projects in the city that are moving off of the long-range plan stage 2 and into the TIP. This is a good thing because it means projects are moving closer to construction and completion in the TIP years. I also wanted to take note of a few projects that are on the current TIP within the city of Pittsburgh. So projects moving from stage 2 to the TIP in this plan include the Charles Anderson Bridge, the Swindell Bridge, the Glenwood Bridge, the Becks Run Road project, the Keys Rocks Bridge, the Larimer Bridge, and projects currently on the TIP include the new RAISE grant that was obtained by the city of Pittsburgh, the new Pathways to Equity RAISE grant for a project in the Hill District, the Beaver Avenue Esplanade study, the Swinburne Bridge, the South Negley Avenue Bridge, the Liberty Avenue Safety Project through the Strip District, I believe, and the Downtown Pittsburgh Pedestrian Wayfinding project, as well as the Smithfield Street Reconstruction project Phase 1. Next slide, please. Let's see here. Here are some city level highlights from the long range plan project list. As I mentioned, bridges are a large percentage of the investment in the region, and the city is certainly no different. We have a large listing of bridge projects within the city, and they include bridges owned by PennDOT, the county, and city. I've also listed some of the larger roadway projects, many of which are on the major corridors I talked about earlier. You can find the full project list within the appendix of the plan, which is on our website. One aspect to mention here is that many of these projects may have opportunities for multimodal enhancements through the project development and PennDOT Connects process. For example, the Charles Anderson Bridge, I believe what the city is planning is to really remake that bridge to enhance pedestrian and bicycle access and mobility on that bridge. Next slide, please. The long-range plan also includes revenue projections, investments, and projects on the transit side. Here's a graph showing the regional investments in transit. Large investment in operating and maintenance with key transit investments in facilities and vehicles. Next slide. SPC transit planners met with each of the transit operators in the region to discuss future needs, projected revenue, and future projects to develop a list of long-range plan projects within fiscal constraint. Here, zooming in on just Allegheny County and the PRT area, you can see some of the highlights and the investments by investment category. I'll note here, for example, new facilities and garages, the downtown Pittsburgh Transit Center, library line upgrades, Allentown LRT improvements, East Busway to Monroeville Rapid Transit, just to note a few. Again, all of the detailed information on the transit project list is contained in the appendix of the plan. Next slide, please. The information on this slide comes right from PRT's long-range plan. I'm going to invite Dave Totten to say a few words about this slide. Hi, Dave. Dave Totten is our transit planner at SPC. David?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, thanks. Yes, just to draw special attention to Next Transit because it's such a great plan, and PRT put so much effort into it, involved the whole community, involved the whole county. And I just grabbed two images off of it. Both of these are, one of these is in the city of Pittsburgh and one is not, but both of these are actually on in the planning stage on the TIP right now. So these are actually in stage 1. But the top one is an image of the 837 multimodal upgrade project that's being planned currently in cooperation with PennDOT District 11 that'll involve, as you can see, multimodal improvements like better pedestrian crossings, better bus stops, transit signal priority, queue jump lanes, stuff that's really going to revolutionize transit in this in the whole region when this stuff gets going. And the other one, the corridor, the other image is their example of the Corridor G project, which is just kind of a purple line as a placeholder because they haven't chosen a mode for that, but is the river to river crossing that would go from Carrick all the way to the Strip District, crossing a river, crossing hills. That project is a planning study that's going to get underway. Could include inclines, buses, gondolas. It could include all. I don't know. So they've just got a purple line on there. But the big thing from that I want to point out here is that the projects that were noted in Next Transit are in the SPC long range plan. They're all in there, and quite a few of them are in phase 2 and phase 3. And the ones that are in phase 2 are in the fiscally constrained part of the long range plan. The bipartisan infrastructure law provides enough resources that we feel like we can say that they're fiscally constrained, at least the planning studies to set them up and line them up for future funding. This is going to be a really exciting time, and there's a chance to do a lot of major investments, including in the city. Dom pointed out the Allentown line, doing a study to look at restarting service on that light rail line, what that would be like. Looking at the library line, trying to see what the best use of that would be. Lots of different directions that could go, and extensions to the East Busway and to the airport, McKnight Road. But the big thing is going to be the new facility. In order to do any of this, they're going to need a new garage. It's going to be huge. It's going to be a big garage. It's going to be a zero emissions fuel garage. I'm not gonna put my finger on exactly what that means at this stage, but those garages are going for big bucks across the country right now. This is going to be a big lift and a big deal. I don't know that it's going to be in the city. It might be someplace else in the county where it's going to make the most operational sense. But keep an eye on that. That's going to come out of a facilities master plan study. That's the first step, and they're getting started with that right now.
Thank you, David. Next slide. As many of you know, the interstate program is managed statewide out of PennDOT Central Office in Harrisburg. So the funding and projects we've been discussing up till now doesn't include the major interstate projects. Nonetheless, we include the current interstate program in the appendix of the plan. Shown at the right here is the 12-year interstate program in PennDOT District 11. We also work with each PennDOT district to put together a list of unfunded interstate needs. There is an identified unfunded interstate need of over $1 billion right now. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm going to shift gears here a little bit and talk about some other required elements of our long-range plan. It includes population and employment forecasts. Our forecasts project a very, very modest growth, 1% population growth out to year 2050. When you look at it regionally, all 10 counties. And also in terms of employment forecast, we're projecting a 12% growth in employment out to year 2050. In terms of transportation performance management, these have to do with how we are performing with regard to bridge and road condition, safety, travel reliability, and air quality. These are federal performance measures. Air quality conformity. It answers the question, does our proposed long-range plan meet the Federal Clean Air Act? Environmental justice. That answers the question, are the benefits and burdens of our plan equitably distributed? And of course, We are required to coordinate our efforts with many other agencies. For example, regulatory, environmental resource, and cultural resource agencies like the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, DCNR. Next slide, please. The conclusion of our environmental justice analysis indicates that projects identified in our draft long-range plan demonstrates that benefits of the program projects and total investment of resources are equitable to populations who are traditionally or have the potential to be disadvantaged in the planning process. Furthermore, no population groups were found to be disproportionately or adversely affected by the implementation of our draft plan. Next slide. Here on this slide, I want to highlight the air quality designation areas. The EPA has designated 3 non-attainment and maintenance areas in the SPC planning region for the 8-hour ozone standard. These include the Pittsburgh Beaver Valley non-attainment area, comprised of the 7 counties, Allegheny, Armstrong, Beaver, Butler, Fayette, Washington, and Westmoreland. That's the area in blue. The Greene County maintenance area, comprised of Greene County in its entirety, area in green, and the Clearfield, Indiana maintenance area, comprised of Clearfield County, which is outside of SPC's planning area, and Indiana County, which is within our planning area, and that's the area in orange. Conformity determinations for transportation plans and programs are based as appropriate on build, no build analysis, and in this case, comparisons to an emissions budget. Next slide. So this is going to get a little technical, and I'll try to be quick through it. For the Pittsburgh Beaver Valley ozone area, these are the emissions projections. The graph on the left is volatile organic compounds, mostly unburned gas from the tailpipe. The graph on the right is nitrogen oxides, a byproduct of fuel combustion. For both graphs, the top line is the motor vehicle emission budget approved for our area for the type of emission represented in tons per day. Bottom line is the emission projection out to 2050, year 2050 in tons per day. Conformity is demonstrated if emission projection is lower than the budget. The graphs do show that this is the case for our draft plan. Next slide. And then another air quality standard is what's called PM 2.5, which is PM meaning particulate matter, referring to tiny particles in the air that are 2.5 microns or less in width. The graph on the left is the PM 2.5 standard, the particles from tire wear, brake wear, and fuel combustion byproducts. The graph on the right is nitrogen oxides, a byproduct of fuel combustion. This is just another federal standard, a federal measure. Both graphs, top line is the motor vehicle emission budget approved for our area. The bottom line is the emission projection out to 2050 in tons per year. Again, conformity is demonstrated if emission projection is lower than budget. The graphs do show that this is the case. In conclusion, our draft plan is in conformance with the Federal Clean Air Act. Next slide. And so now I think you're tired of listening to me. I'm going to turn it over to Jen Lasser, our Director of Workforce and Economic Development, who will review those areas of the plan with you tonight. Jen?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jen Lasser, Director of Workforce and Economic Development with SPC, and I'm going to give you some of the strategies that were in the prior plan and the updates that we're working towards. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, under a global competitive economy, workforce is one of the #1 areas of needed improvement. And so the strategies that were placed into this plan were, of course, building a diverse local workforce that's going to meet the needs for a highly skilled talent across all of the sectors that we have here in Southwestern Pennsylvania. It's very important that we not only keep who we have here, but we grow the candidate size of the market. And more importantly, ensure that those folks that are here have the soft skills and the technical skills that are needed to meet that 21st century modern workforce. And so some of the things that we have been working on is we have a lot of workforce committees currently in place that are determining whatever those regional priorities are going to be based on what the industry needs, what the workforce looks like. But more importantly, we're starting to really get into what are the barriers to employment, what are the barriers to education, making sure that not only do we know what they are, but what are the things that we can put in place to mitigate some of those barriers. And so a lot of promotions on career pathways and on the job training opportunities for current and future workers. As you know, the region was awarded over $60 million for a Build Back Better Regional Challenge grant. And this grant was put in place to basically really create a robust robotics, autonomy, and AI industry here. And so a lot of working parts, a lot of partners on this grant, a lot of regional universities, colleges, workforce investment boards coming together to provide opportunities into that industry. Something that's really important here is the number one focus of this grant is equity, and that we want to ensure that individuals that are interested into getting into these careers have access to do so. And again, the EDA grant has the focus of equity in underserved areas and underserved individuals. And so that's urban, rural, et cetera. But the goal here is to provide access to family sustaining wages. And additionally, your EDOs, your economic development organizations, are working with campaigns to create and recruit opportunities to not only, again, retain who we have, keep our rooted individuals, keep rooted businesses, but bring new business and new individuals to the region. So, and finally, working with our workforce investment boards and our partners to increase those opportunities for underserved populations. So think long-time unemployed individuals that may have been previously incarcerated, individuals who may have priorly had an issue with substance abuse. Again, making sure that those opportunities exist for underserved populations and everybody has an equal opportunity for employment. Next slide, please. So when thinking about the globally competitive economy, infrastructure is a major factor here. So we want to keep our aging public infrastructure in a state of good repair. And not only to support the growth, we need to make sure that whatever implementations we're putting in place, it is for infrastructure of the future. So making sure that our infrastructure has economic success factored into that, embracing innovation, technology to improve efficiency, supporting projects that maximize the local use of our derived energy industry. Southwestern Pennsylvania has one of the most diverse energy economies in the world. And that's something that heavily plays into why we continue to be very, very successful in areas like advanced manufacturing and other industries. And so when you figure we have solar, carbon capture, natural gas, coal, working with Hydrogen Hub. And so areas that we've made some progress is utilized IIJA, transportation funding, as well as grant resources to apply for and receive funding to support and grow the region's infrastructure. I'm seeing under my side, I'm seeing a lot of water sewer projects come across. So we're working to do that. We're working with our regional partners on energy diversification projects, again, such as solar, carbon capture, natural gas, Hydrogen Hub. As you may be aware, Team PA submitted a regional Hydrogen Hub application for Southwestern Pennsylvania. We're working to really determine what the economic impacts of infrastructure projects truly are. You know, as we continue to ask people to live, work, and play in businesses to stay and grow, you know, we need to ensure that we have the proper infrastructure to support them. So whether that is water and sewer, if it's going to be electrical grids, if it's whatever those businesses and those individuals need, you know, we want to make sure that we have that to keep them here. And the question is, how are you going to do that in terms of the workforce? Your community colleges, your workforce investment boards, and other training providers are working diligently to support those needs of advanced manufacturing and energy sectors by putting together programming to quickly get people trained and into the workforce. Next slide. And finally, under this is technology. So really broadband. Fast-paced technology identification, deployment, and the adoption of broadband across all sectors will truly give this region a competitive advantage. So ensuring that this region has equal access to high-speed internet connectivity is essential to prevent residents and communities from being left behind. As Dom mentioned, we have experienced a global pandemic during this time in which most of the world went online. And while a lot of people were able to utilize that, there were a lot of families, businesses, and individuals who couldn't. And so some of the activities that were put in place were a connectivity improvement plan, which was created to provide affordable, reliable broadband internet access across the region. We had a lot of our local governments apply for middle mile grants. SPC and teams hosted a regional broadband summit in February 2023 with over 200 attendees. We're currently working on a small business connectivity survey. So working with our small businesses to find out what are their connectivity needs, how are they currently using, what's missing. When you think about your brick and mortar stores that may now have been affected tremendously by COVID, they may now have an e-commerce site. They may have expanded into different areas that they wouldn't have prior to. So do they have the connectivity to continue to grow and diversify their business? And finally, my point of the last slide as well is who's going to implement and deploy all of this? Well, you're going to need workers to do that. And there's a lot of workforce training projects that are coming through for linemen to get them trained in order to speed up the deployment of broadband. I look forward to any questions that you may have after the presentation, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jen. I'm going to go through, I'm going to take us down the home stretch with a couple of slides on some of the community initiatives, the strategies in our plan, and some of the progress that we're making. Next slide, please. So strategies in our plan include educate and engage municipalities on best practices. While we are continuing to hold workshops, we've held workshops for local governments on local project delivery. Sometimes trying to deliver especially a federal project, can be complicated. So we've held those workshops to teach local governments how to deliver projects that have federal funding. And we've also had workshops on local bridge funding mechanisms. Another strategy is promoting strategic infrastructure investment in communities that reduce risks, including chronic stresses and potential shocks from flooding and landslides, extreme weather, economic downturn, and infrastructure failure. Some of the things we've done or are doing, we've dedicated funding both in our transportation improvement plan and our long-range plan for landslide remediation. We've also assisted counties, thanks to Jen's group, in allocating over $17 million in COVID-19 hospitality industry recovery program funding. Another strategy is invest in strategies that decelerate, adapt to, and are resilient against the impacts of climate change, and promote and support sustainable regional water resource management and planning for water systems. We have expanded SPC Water Resource Center programming and assistance, and we have hired a dedicated environmental programs manager to expand SPC environmental programs, including sustainability and resiliency, that will offer technical assistance to local governments and counties in those areas. Next slide, please. Other strategies in our plan. Invest in strategies that decelerate, adapt to, and are resilient against the impacts of climate change. This includes investment in disaster preparedness, response, and recovery, as well as raising awareness about and combating climate change, its impacts, and regional strategies. Support and encourage low carbon transportation projects or programs that will also contribute to attainment or maintenance of the air quality standards. We are leading the region's planning for the EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. You may have heard of that recently, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, with a broad coalition of partners and stakeholders. We have created an online toolkit for the charging and fueling infrastructure discretionary funding program. We continue to program federal congestion mitigation air quality eligible projects that provide the greatest benefit to regional air quality. And we will begin to allocate the new federal carbon reduction program funding to regional projects. We'll start administering that program sometime this summer. At this point, I want to invite DJ Ryan, who's our Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives at SPC, to say a few words about what his unit is working on and some of the things that I just mentioned that maybe he would like to touch on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dom, and good evening, everybody. I'll be very brief. You've been given a lot of information tonight, so I'll keep it simple. You've heard a ton of acronyms tonight. CPRG, CFI, and CMAC are the three on here. TA, carbon, all these things. And so just to sum that all up simply, there's a ton of funding streams out there for various infrastructure projects. SPC has a wide range of experience in getting these funding applications, and we work regularly with the various agencies within the city of Pittsburgh to partner on applications and find the funds to do the projects that we need. In addition, SPC has its own discretionary programs, a lot of which have been talked about tonight. And the bottom line is this: if you are a community group or a member of the public and you have an idea for an unfunded infrastructure project, I hope that you'll reach out to us at SPC, because we'd like to work with you to find the right funding stream for it. You know, a lot of times we have agencies or community groups that come to us and say, I have this idea and I found this funding program and I think we might be able to make it fit. And we would encourage you to come to us when you're just starting to think about a new project, because there's a ton of opportunities out there that might be perfect for your project that we know about that aren't widely publicized. So please contact us anytime you have an idea, and we're happy to kind of brainstorm it with you. But I'll leave it at there, and if anybody has questions afterward, happy to answer them.
Thank you, DJ. Appreciate that. And I'm going to turn it over to Rhonda Craig, our Public Involvement Coordinator, who's going to talk a little bit about our future meetings and how you can comment on our draft plan. Rhonda.
Thanks, Dom. Next slide. So there's a variety of ways to provide your comment and your feedback. Verbal comments today can be dropped in the chat box. Written comments can be submitted to Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, P.O. Box 101429, Pittsburgh, and there's the zip codes listed there on the screen. And then you can also simply fax it back at 412-391-9160. Electronic forms can be found on SPC's homepage at spcregion.org. Simply click on the Get Involved tab. It'll be listed at the top of our homepage. Scroll down to the bottom of that page and then click on the public input form there. And you can also compile an email and submit it to comments@spcregion.org, or again, attaching that electronic form to an email and sending it to comments@spcregion.org. I will follow up within the next couple weeks with an evaluation email. Please let us know how we did today. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at rcraig@spcregion.org, or go ahead and give me a call at the number there on the screen. And then you can see the schedule of all of the public meetings listed to the left. So where we'll be at coming up if you choose to join us at any of those. Next slide. Please sign up for our newsletter. This is a great way to stay in the loop of what's going on around the region all year long. Please follow us on social media, whether it'll be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn, and check out our YouTube channel where videos or great videos can be found. Today's meeting will be posted there, and also any past meetings. A huge thank you to everyone for joining us today. We appreciate your time and your participation. Next slide. Up next, we're going to open it up for questions.
Thank you, Rhonda. So I think we've done our talking. It's about 45 minutes worth. And we can go back to any slide anyone wishes to go back to. We want to open this up to comment and to feedback. I don't see, just looking at the chat box. Oh, something just popped in there. Okay. Do you want to, Rhonda, do you want to read Scott Bricker's comment in the chat box? Do you see it?
Yeah. 1% going to new capacity is laudable, but why can't we make it 0? We need as much funding as possible going to fix it first and expanding mobility choice. Transit, biking, walking. 2, how do we make sure TIP projects align with the LRTP? What is the process to make sure there's conformity between short-term TIP projects and the long-term, or the LRTP? Mitigating climate change is a focus of the last LRTP, and will it be in this one? How is SPC thinking about transportation project funding to benefit the climate? 4, equity is a focus of the long-range transportation plan. Great. Transportation is the second highest cost for families next to housing. How will the LRTP focus on increasing access to jobs, healthcare, food, etc. for people who can't afford cars? And how will this plan truly prioritize transportation projects that don't necessitate owning a car in order to access everything people need to thrive? And 5, safely complete streets. Will SPC adopt Vision Zero and complete street policies? That was a lot.
Hey,
Do you
Yeah, I'll try to take it.
want to
I'm
start
sorry.
with
hang
the
on
first
here.
one?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jenny may be having food, or we may be watching the rest of this thing. Anyway,
I'd ask you please mute. I'm going to try to break this down, Scott. 1% going to new capacity. Keep in mind, Scott, when I presented that, we're talking the entire region. There are, to my knowledge, there really aren't very many new capacity. The one I can think about, the one I'm thinking about is up on Route 228 in Butler. There's additional capacity being added there in Butler County. I don't think there's any capacity projects in Allegheny County, new capacity in Allegheny or city. I could be wrong about that, but we can check on that. Number 2, how do we make sure TIP projects align with the LRTP? Well, that's one of the things that we do. We do an analysis of our TIP projects to see how they align with the vision, goals, and strategies in our long range plan. We put that down on paper. Let's see here. Mitigating climate change is a focus, and it will be in this one. How is SPC thinking about transportation project funding to benefit the climate? Well, I mean, we're always thinking about that. I mean, we're making significant investments in transit. We are starting to make significant investments in electrification of the transit fleet. So, I think we're moving in that direction fairly well. Equity is a focus of the long range plan. Great. Transportation is the second highest cost for families next to housing. How will the long range plan focus on increasing access to jobs, healthcare, food? It's a strategy right in the plan. I think there's a pilot program right now that assists folks with transit costs. I think that's a program we want to look at and possibly have discussions with folks about possibly enhancing. I think that's one of the things I can talk about. But I think we're all that these are strategies that are right in the plan. How will this plan truly prioritize transportation projects that don't necessitate owning a car in order to access everything people need to thrive? As I said, we're making multimodal investments. I think I presented that tonight. I think that's one way to do that. Jen started to explain how she wants to start to really look at the true value of transportation investments and so forth. So we're going to start looking at those kinds of things. Safety and complete streets. I think I did mention context sensitive design in my presentation. Will SPC adopt Vision Zero? Vision Zero is already part of our safety action plan that is adopted. We will further elaborate on that, I think, in the near future. And complete streets is a policy that we're kicking around, and we've actually drafted a complete streets policy. So stay tuned on that front. Complete streets meaning safe and safe streets for all users, and especially vulnerable users like children, the elderly, pedestrians, bicyclists, etc. So I think all of the above, Scott.
We have another question from Maureen Shaw. Will future projects include future required maintenance in their budgeting projections?
How will Allegheny County make sure that we are able to pay for the roads we put in? Okay. Future required maintenance. I think some of our capital projects are maintenance projects, especially for our bridges and roads. In terms of routine operational maintenance, those aren't part of our budgeting process now. But I got to say that, as you know, maintenance, some of these projects that are on our tip and are on our long range plan is our state of good repair projects. I mean, they really include maintenance of bridges and roadways. For example, just this came to my mind. We've made some smaller investments to some of our larger bridge crossings over the years, and now we've reached a point where those were sort of like upkeep to keep the bridge in decent condition. But now we've reached the point on some of these larger bridge crossings that we need to make a more significant investment.
Another question from Angela. What area of the plan should we look at for details on the regional job and population trends?
That is one of the appendices. I don't know the appendix number. I can get that for you, Angela.
That question. Why is future required maintenance not included in our road infrastructure budgeting? Considering these roads are future liabilities, we continually to find out with these maintenance costs we are paying every year.
Well, I think, as I mentioned, the maintenance is part of, it depends on how you define maintenance. I mean, snow removal, no. But if you're talking about maintenance that is capitalized, then that is part of our budgeting.
Gavin, how do you distinguish between minor and major projects?
I just think that's relative. I mean, major projects, minor projects. I think minor projects are going to be, maybe $2 million or less. Major projects is probably everything else. But I mean, that's relative. That's relative to the tier of the roadway or where it's located and whether a minor project to PennDOT or the county could be a major project for a municipality, which would be like a municipal bridge. Anything else?
Hey, Dom, it's Caitlin. Hey,
Hey,
I
Caitlin.
just wanted to chime in real quick and let everyone know if anyone wants to take themselves off of mute and talk and be on video with us, please feel free. I just don't want anyone to think you just have to put everything in the chat box. So I just wanted to note that.
Well, I'll just chime in then. Thanks, and say I asked because you'd mentioned that minor projects are not included in the LRTP. Beyond that sort of tip period, and I didn't know how you make that distinction.
Okay, so we have in the third phase of the long range plan, we have more line items, and those line items are going to cover, minor projects. So we don't have the minor project identified, but we might have it identified 2 years from now. So we have line items in the plan for bridges, roadways, et cetera, that would cover minor projects like that.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Anything else? Rhonda, you want to handle that last one?
Yeah. If you have project recommendations, how do we submit them? Sorry.
They would be a public comment. So go ahead, Rhonda.
Oh, yeah. So you can submit it by going to our homepage, and you can click on where you submit the comments there, and you just follow the prompters, the questions, and answer them. And it's in the body of the form that you can fill out.
And
you can send it to comments@spcregion.org. I'm sorry, Don.
I was just going to say, we are required to respond to each and every comment that we receive before we go to our commission for adoption. The commission, we have those responses in hand.
I'm going to chime in. This is Caitlin from SPC. Just to layer onto what Dom and Rhonda said. So just very briefly, so there's a couple different ways, like they said. So you can send us hard copy, email. We have an online form that you can submit, or you can fax it to us. And all the comments here we're capturing. And the homepage that Rhonda referred to, that's right on the front section of our website. And that has every different way you can get in touch with us listed right there for easy access.
Let me mention one more thing. So right after we adopt the long range plan, we go right into our new tip. So which will be the 2025-2028 tip. And that is a place where you could submit a project. And there's a couple ways you can do that. So our tip work group includes your city DOMI staff, Jeff Scallican, and also includes county planner, in this case, Ann O'Gork. So you can submit a project for the tip through them, or you could simply submit it to us. And and all project suggestions are discussed by the tip work group. Anything else? thank you all for participating this evening. Really appreciate your time, and please provide us any comment that you have, any feedback that you have through those channels that Rhonda mentioned. Thank you all, and have a great Memorial Day weekend.